After reading the story of Captain James Cook, I'd like you to answer the comprehension questions in your English booklet, and it says reading task 1 for week 4. If you want to read through it at your own pace, you can also press on the little speaker button on the screen to hear it read to you. So we're going to look through these questions now. Make sure you've read it first, and I'll go through with you. Where was James Cook born? And we want to give as much information as possible. It says Marton, Yorkshire, and that's in England. So we're going to write Marton. Make sure you've got a capital letter, writing neatly on the line. Marton, comma, Yorkshire. In England. Running out of room there, keeping it nice and small. Do you think he lived in a wealthy family, and why? So we need a full sentence answer. If I come to the second slide here with the starting to write the information, it says his father was a farmer and he grew up on the farm. However, he was very interested in the sea. Now, if you're a farmer, you're not going to be wealthy like someone who is a commander or royalty, or even someone who works in the Navy, so they wouldn't have had a lot of money. So we can say, do you think he lived in a wealthy family? We could say Cook, or really James, we should use his first name. James would not be very wealthy, or would not have a very wealthy family, because he grew up on a farm. They didn't get a lot of money, the farmers, especially in 1728. When did James Cook learn his sailing skills? So we're going to need to come down a little bit, and it says on the third slide, when he was 17, he moved to the coast in Whitby, North Yorkshire. He got a job as a coal merchant. Then jumping to the next slide, it says during his time as a coal merchant, he demonstrated excellent sailing skills. So he learnt his sailing skills when he was a coal merchant, and it says up here that that's when he was 17. So we can write, he learnt his sailing skills when he was 17. Working as a coal merchant. And coal was used by everyone for heat and electricity and things. So coal merchant means he sold it. He used to sail on the boat and they would sell the coal. And full stop. So he learnt his sailing skills, spelling mistake, when he was 17 working as a coal merchant. What was the name of the ship he commanded and sailed around the world on? So on that same page 4, it says, the age of 40, he was promoted to commander of the ship called the HMS Endeavour. So from the Endeavour, we can say the HMS, Her Majesty's Service Endeavour, which means it was a royal ship, not just any ship, on special commission to do service for England. Why did the British government send Captain Cook on an expedition to the Southern Hemisphere? So we're going to go down to our next page, page number 5. It says, in 1769, the planet Venus was due to pass in front of the Sun, a rare event visible only in the Southern Hemisphere. So why did they send him there to the southern hemisphere? It was to see the transit of Venus or to see Venus pass in front of the sun. So he was sent to study Venus passing or moving in front of the sun. My writing's not too neat on the screen. And that was because they didn't have all the equipment to normally see into space, so things like this were very special. Where did Cook travel and explore after Tahiti? So we need to go to the next slide, 6. And it says, having observed the transit of Venus in Tahiti, the Endeavour and the crew sailed south to explore new uncharted waters. Cook promised his crew that the first person to see new land would have that area named after them. So they saw the east coast of the North Island of New Zealand. They travelled to New Zealand, capital N-E-W-Z-E-A-L-A-N-D. Okay, number 7. Who was the Dutch explorer who saw New Zealand and Tasmania 127 years before James Cook? Now, this was the man who had Tasmania named after him. On the next page, on page 7, it says, not the first, just near his head. 127 years before Cook's arrival, in December 1642, a Dutch explorer, Abel Tasman. And we read about Abel. So who was it? It was Abel Tasman. Okay, number 8 says, who were the botanists, the 2 botanists or scientists on board the HMS Endeavour? And if we come through and have a look, this picture with the plants on slide 8. It says the 2 botanists and collectors, Joseph Banks and Daniel Solander. So capital letter, watch your spelling. Joseph Banks, and he's very famous because the Banksia tree was named after him. Notice his last name is Banks. And Daniel Solander. I think there may be a Solander fish named after him. So they studied all the plants and animals. Who were the 2 botanists on board? So Joseph Banks and Daniel Solander were the scientists on board. We'll stop. So we try and use a full sentence where we can. Oops. Just come back to that one. Okay, then it says, when did Captain Cook land? Or when did Captain Cook landed in Botany Bay? Oops, there's a bit of a spelling mistake there. When did Captain Cook land in Botany Bay? And here's our picture with Botany Bay on slide 9. It says April 1770. They spotted the east coast. They continued to sail along the Australian coast and eventually set foot on land in Australia at Botany Bay. So April 1770. April 1770. After he claimed the land as British territory, what did he call it? And he called this whole area, now at the time it was called New Holland, but he wanted to claim that area. So it was New, N-E-W, South, and Wales after the country Wales, not Wales in the ocean. Okay, 11. What was Australia called by the Dutch explorers? And we know down here the Dutch explorers who first spotted Australia had referred to the land as New Holland. Remember, they were from Holland, so they called this New Holland. Not very original. and the Aboriginals had their own name for it. And the last one, why was Captain Cook considered such a famous explorer? And it does mention that towards the end when we can see his statue. It says Captain Cook is considered one of the world's greatest explorers and was the first person to create an accurate map of the Pacific Ocean. So he was actually the first Englishman to sit up here when he landed in Botany Bay, that he claimed it as British territory, and he was the first European to spot the coast of Australia. So he was the first European to probably spot and land on the east coast of Australia. So they landed in the north and on the west coast before that, the east coast of Australia. Okay. And lastly, it also says that he made the maps. So he was the first person to create an accurate map. He was the first person to create an accurate or a precise or a clear accurate map of the Pacific. Now that's not just the ocean, but all the islands and the areas around Australia of the Pacific. So I don't need to put ocean there, I can just put Pacific, which means all of that area. And that's your comprehension for Monday. Well done, everybody.